In this talk, we would like to discuss Russian etafocus and topic sentences as elliptical question-answer pairs. First, let us take a look at a couple of examples from English. Specificational pseudoclefts of this question-answer pair type are well known in English. You can see an example in 1a. For instance, we can say, what he likes is syntax. The sentence contains a double H clause, old information, what he likes, and the XP, the focus constituent, new information, syntax. And the two are connected by this copular is. We can also say what he likes is he likes syntax, so the focused XP can be contained in a full clause. And such sentences are very similar to question-answer pairs involving two interlocutors. So for instance, we can also say, what does he like? The answer, he likes syntax, or just syntax. And this short dialogue in 2a is very similar to these sentences in 1a and 1b. Taking this into account, Dendicke, Meininger, and Wilder proposed in 2000 that such SPCs syntactically represent question-answer pairs. So the structure is schematized in 3. We have here this top P, this topic phrase, with is, the copula, being the topic head. And in the specifier position of this top P, we have the question CP, what he likes. And in the complement position of this top P, we have the answer IP, he likes syntax. And the part of this IP can be reduced via ellipsis, so only the focused XP is left. We pronounce only syntax. So Dendicke, Meininger, and Wilder essentially suggest that the CP and the IP are connected in this top P as in a small clause. So the copula is can be considered a relator, a functional head that connects the subject, the question CP, and the predicate, the answer IP. If we take a look at English data more closely, we will notice that English strictly prohibits SPCs of the question-answer pair type with yes, no, or whether questions. So if I want to say whether he likes syntax is yes, or he likes, whether he likes syntax is he does, all of these sentences are ungrammatical. And so we ask the following question. Is this restriction language specific, or is it rather universal? And our claim is that universal grammar does not prohibit self-answering reduced question-answer pairs of the yes-no type. However rare these examples are, they still can be found, and we would like to demonstrate that they can be found in Russian. So in this talk, we will consider Russian etafocus clefts and topic constructions, and we will propose that all of them are biclausal and all of them should be analyzed as question-answer pairs of the following kind. So basically the structure here in 5 parallels the one proposed for English by Dendicke, Meininger, and Wilder that you have just seen. So here we have the top P. The top head is a demonstrative, either this eta or that to, and it connects together the question CP in the specifier of this top P and the answer IP in the complement position of this top P. And the 3 kinds of Russian clefts that we will consider are schematized in 6a, b, and c. So we will consider 2 kinds of eta-focus constructions. One of them is with the part of answer being elided, and the second one is with the double H question being elided. And what's more important, we will demonstrate that the so-called topic constructions are also biclausal, and they also involve this question part, and that question part, which is elided, is essentially a yes-no question. So this is basically the kind of SPCs that is missing in English. And we will try to persuade you that the Russian data can actually fill in this gap in the typology of specificational pseudoclefts. So throughout this handout, all the examples are color-coded. The top head is always in red, that is the demonstrative in Russian. The focus XP is always in blue, and as you will see soon, the topicalized YP is always in green. So first, let us take a quick look at Russian focus clefts, focus SPCs. First, we have focus SPCs with the reduced answer part. They're illustrated here in 7, and they are parallel to their English counterparts, in fact. So here we also have this double H clause, what Petya bought. Then we have an optional particle. Then we have the demonstrative, this, a proximal demonstrative, and it must be immediately followed by the focus XP. Nothing can intervene between the 2, in fact. So we have here what Petya bought, this a doll. what Peter bought, what a doll. And such examples, similar to their English counterparts, are parallel to those question-answer pairs involving two interlocutors. So you can say an example in 8a, I can ask a question, what Peter bought, and the answer will be Peter bought a doll, or just a short answer, a doll. So we argue that such focused SPCs are basically question-answer pairs. The question and the answer are combined within this top P, top phrase. Eta, the demonstrative, is the top hat. The double H question is in the specifier position. The IP, the reduced answer, is in the complement position. And part of the answer, except for this focused text P, is elided, is deleted. Unfortunately, I will not have time to discuss the issue of this ellipsis and the mechanism of this ellipsis in the talk, but you can find these data and the discussion in the paper, in the proceedings. Now, for Russian SPCs of this kind, it is even clearer than for their English counterparts that they indeed involve a question and an answer. So the double H clause is unambiguously a question. First, it can contain an interrogative pronoun. Similarly, Russian SPCs of this kind allow multiple double H operators, which are prohibited in relative clauses. So, for instance, I can say, что, где Петя купил, так это куклу в магазине. What, where Peter bought, this, a doll in a shop. And we have here two focused XPs, two foci. Similarly, we can have them in root interrogatives. I can ask a question, what, where Peter bought, what did Peter buy where, but we cannot have multiple double H operators in relative clauses. So I cannot say, for example, gift, what, where Peter bought. Now, the focused XP in such focused SPCs is indeed a part of the answer, syntactically parallel to the question. Remember that the focused XP is the only thing that we see to the right of the top hat, and the rest of the IP is obligatorily elided. But we can see that that remnant IP is still structurally there, because first we have case connectivity. The nominal XP must always have the same case as the question word, and that suggests that this XP is a part of a larger clausal structure parallel to the question clause, which contains this like case assigner. Second, extraction from the focused XP is prohibited, and here we follow the Deakin, Meining, and Wilder and assume that this is because incomplete answers with an unbound variable are ungrammatical and ruled out. Now, more interestingly, Russian also has focused SPCs with a reduced question part. You can say an example here in 14. So here the demonstrative, the top hat, is the leftmost element in a sentence. Nothing can precede it. There is no double H clause in front of it, right? Then it must immediately be followed by the focused XP. Again, nothing can intervene between the two. And then we have the rest of the clause following, basically. So, for example, I can say, this doll Peter bought. The translation is, it was a doll that Peter bought, and not something else, for example. So we argue again that these clefs are biclausal question-answer pairs with a wholly elided double H question part. So in fact, in 14a and in 14b, there is this double H clause to the left of the demonstrative, if you want, but that double H clause is wholly elided. Here you can see the structure that we propose. So again, we have this top P, topic phrase. We have the double H question in the specifier position, and that's wholly reduced. And we have the answer IP in the complement position, and the two are connected, are linked together with this relator, with this top hat, which manifests itself as a proximal demonstrative eta. And you can see here that the whole question clause again is not pronounced. How can we demonstrate that that invisible question part is in fact structurally present? So we propose to consider sentences with several focused XPs, and even though multiple foci in principle are available in Russian, there can always only be one eta, one demonstrative. So we argue that that is because there is always this single top hat, spelled out as a demonstrative pronoun, that connects a double H question and an answer together, and that double H question can have multiple double H operators, right? And the answer can have multiple foci. but there is always this one demonstrative, this one top hat connecting the two. You can see in example 16. So I can ask a question, for instance, whom kissed? And the answer would be this Peter, Mary accusative kissed. But the answer cannot be this Peter, this Mary accusative kissed. So I can only have one leftmost demonstrative. I cannot have two demonstratives. So now that we have seen that Russian indeed has these SPCs of the Demophomilia kind, we can move on and consider finally Russian tautopic lefts. And we argue that they represent that missing kind, that they are in fact also biclausal, that they are question-answer pairs, and that the question there is a yes-no question. So let us take a look at a couple of examples first. On the surface, sentences with a tautopic resemble clauses with an ordinary left dislocated topic. So topics are color-coded in green, and they are denoted as YP. So here you can see, so we have the topic first, then we have the to particle or the to demonstrative immediately following it. Nothing again can intervene between the two, and then we have the rest of the clause. And this is very similar to ordinary left dislocated topics. So we can say beautiful doll that Peter bought. As for the beautiful doll, Peter bought it. Or we can say beautiful doll Peter bought. The beautiful doll, Peter bought it. On the surface look very similar. Maybe the 17a and 17b are both monoclausal constructions with just left dislocated topic. This analysis is actually very popular for Russian. However, we argue that this analysis is incorrect for tautopic constructions, and we suggest instead that these sentences are biclausal and should be analyzed as involving a question-answer pair with a yes-no question. So this is the structure that we propose for them. Again, we have this top P, we have the question CP in the specifier position, and this time this is a reduced yes-no question. And we have the answer IP in the complement position. And the two are connected by this relator, which manifests itself as the to demonstrative, the distal demonstrative. And you can see as schematized here that a part of the question and a part of the answer is elided essentially. So only this topic YP is left pronounced in the question part, and basically this topic YP is the only thing that is not pronounced in the answer part. And then we can recover the rest of the sentence using this information. And again, such tautopic lefts are very similar to those question-answer pairs involving two interlocutors. So I can also ask a question like, Peter bought a doll? Yes or no? And the answer will be yes, Peter bought a doll. So let us take a look at a couple of empirical differences between these tautopic constructions and ordinary topic constructions involving a left dislocated topic to demonstrate that tautopics are indeed biclausal. So first of all, there can be only one tautopic in a clause, even though in general multiple topics are allowed. And we propose that that's because in clefts of the QIP type, there is a single top hat that relates the question part to the answer part. And so we can't have multiple questions stuck on top of each other, essentially. Then tautopics must always be at the very left edge of a sentence, preceding foci and unmarked topics, even though, again, ordinarily there is no such restriction for topics in Russian. We propose that that is because, aside from the topic YP, the topic constituent, the rest of the question CP is elided, so no topic or focus can survive from that part of a sentence. And then as for the answer IP, we suggest that although it may contain foci and unmarked topics at the left periphery, right, there is no structure above the main top P with the tautopic hand where those could move to. So essentially the question is the topmost element in a sentence and there is no position above it. So all those topics and foci from the answer clause must stay within that answer clause because there is no place for them to move to. Finally, the analysis that we propose explains the behavior of liba and betanibola, whichever indefinite pronouns. And this is very interesting. So these pronouns are negative polarity items elicited in affirmative clauses, right? So as you can see, examples in 22 are all ungrammatical. And here what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to have this liba pronoun, for example, in a sentence. I'm trying to have it in situ or I'm trying to topicalize it. And all of these examples are ungrammatical. For instance, I cannot say что-либо Петя купил in an affirmative clause, something Peter bought. That's ungrammatical. However, these pronouns are acceptable in questions. So if I turn this sentence into a question, что-либо Петя купил, did Peter buy anything, as a question, the sentence becomes licit and grammatical. And similarly, these pronouns are acceptable as topics. So as a simple topic, it's ungrammatical to use such a pronoun, but as this topic, it suddenly becomes completely normal. So I can say something like что-либо Петя купил, something that Peter bought. Indeed, Peter bought something. And so we suggest that this sort of patterning of topics with questions is expected if the topic preceding to is merged in an interrogative clause. So this lieber pronoun in 23a, for example, is licensed in the question, right? And similarly, this lieber pronoun in 24a is also licensed in the question part, in the yes-no question preceding the to demonstrative. We have seen that both etaphlosa and topics involve juxtapositions of a question and an answer, with ellipses reducing either or both of the constituent clauses. So the general structure is illustrated in 25. Again, we have the top P, we have the question, we have the answer. The question can be either a double-H question or a yes-no question. The top hat can be manifested as either a distal demonstrative, in Russian it's going to be to, or a proximal demonstrative, in Russian it will be это. So the summary is provided in 26. And as you can see here, we have this peculiar correlation in Russian. So the distal demonstrative to is chosen as this top hat if there is a yes-no question in spector P, and the proximal demonstrative это appears if there is a double-H question in spector P. And the final question that I would like to address is whether we can explain this correlation somehow. So to explain this correlation, we propose that the choice of the demonstrative depends on the location of the feature plus proximal in the QIP. So step 1, we argue that double-H questions are not marked for proximality, they don't have this feature, but in contrast, yes-no questions are plus proximal. So we suggest that the silent operator in spec CP in yes-no questions is specified as plus proximal. Then this operator entertains a spec hat relation with the C hat, and then the plus proximal feature from the C hat propagates to the yes-no CP as a whole by this hat to phrase percolation. Why do I assume that this silent operator in spec CP is plus proximal? So here we mostly consider data from English, but we assume that by extension, this is also true for Russian. So in English, the overt yes-no question operator, whether, is essentially the double-H form of either, and either occurs on the first member of G-junctions. Now, coordination of two demonstratives with opposite values for plus proximal normally involves firstly the proximal demonstrative and only after that the distal one. So the unmarked version is either this or that, and not either that or this. The second option is highly marked and usually involves some sort of extension. So either, and by extension whether and a Snell allomorph, in coordinations of demonstratives accompanies the proximal element, and hence we suggest that perhaps it itself is specified as plus proximal. The second consideration here that we can also pay attention to is that double-H questions typically concern a previously established context. But yes-no questions, in contrast, are often discussed new, and when a new entity is introduced into the discourse, it can be accompanied by a proximal demonstrative, but not by a distal one. So normally I would say something like, this topic I'm going to tell you about will fascinate you. But I don't say that topic I'm going to tell you about will fascinate you. And this is also true for Russian, so we can construct the parallel examples in Russian and they will work the same way. So going back to our proposal, we suggest that the choice of the demonstrative depends on the location of the feature plus proximal. Double-H questions are unmarked for proximality, yes-no questions are inherently plus proximal. Now, the second step is we suggest that the QIPs are a positive with respect to the feature plus proximal. So basically what we have here is the combination of two elements, and whatever the specification of the question clause is for this proximal feature, the answer clause must always have the opposite value of it. So for example, in topic clouds, we have spec top P occupied by this plus proximal yes-no question. That means that the answer clause is not specified as plus proximal. Now we assume that the demonstrative pronoun in top hat is in a downward degree relation with this complement, that is the answer clause, and bears the same feature. So if the answer clause is not specified as plus proximal, that means that the top hat is also not specified as plus proximal. That means that we will choose a distal demonstrative to manifest the hat, that is to that pronoun. And in focus SPCs, spec top P is occupied by a non-proximal WH question. That means that the answer clause and the agree in top hat must be plus proximal. There are several possible directions for future research, and one of them is to ask the question, are there other languages allowing for similar yes-no type constructions? At first glance, for example, there are no such constructions in English and in many other Indo-European languages. However, clausal question-answer pairs produced by the same speaker that involve a WH or a yes-no question are attested in several sign languages. So, for example, they are tested in the American Sign Language and in the Sign Language of Netherlands. You can see an example here in 30. We have this question-answer pair forming a complex sentence in American Sign Language. And at first glance, it seems very plausible to analyze the bracketed portion of such constructions, as in 30, as a self-answering question-answer pair. And there are in fact such analysis for these sign languages on the market. However, many researchers argue that this availability of polar questions, yes-no questions, distinguishes the clausal QIPs significantly from pseudoclafts in such languages. And these researchers use this as an argument against such an approach. So we suggest that the Russian data, if the proposed analysis is on the right track, can actually reinforce the discussion of such examples in sign languages as well, and motivate us to reanalyze them and to reconsider them. Thank you so much for your attention.